You're listening to Widowed AF with
Rosie Gilmoss
and Lucinda Boast.
We've invited some members of the world's most exclusive club to bravely share their stories.
Join us for some honest conversations about living a different life, the crushing lows, the surprising highs, and everything in between.
Please note this is a podcast about death. Carefully read the episode descriptions and be kind to yourself.
But for now, welcome to our podcast.
Let's begin. Hello and welcome back to Widowed AF. You're here with Rosie and my special guest today is Sasha. Hello, Sasha.
Hello, how are you?
I'm really well. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, you have an American accent, but you're in the UK, aren't you?
Yes, I have been here since 2020.
And you moved just before lockdown. You've just told me before we came on mic, haven't you?
Yeah.
Talk about baptism of fire.
Very much.
We'll wait to see our country at its finest, eh? So, you moved over here, presumably, for your husband. Were you married before you moved over?
No, so we met in the US.
Yeah.
And we swiped right on each other.
Nice.
And we kind of stuck with each other's. And from there, we bounced back and forth between the US and the UK.
And when you moved over here, did you know, because I'm sort of jumping forward a little bit, I should really let you tell your story, but I'm eager. You moved over here. Did you know that he had cancer?
No, that happened at the end of 2020.
Oh, goodness me. And he died last year, didn't he? So you didn't get very long.
No, when he got sick, he was very healthy. And, unfortunately, with young and healthy, you have to rule out much more before you get that cancer diagnosis, I think. He ran an ultramarathon in 2019. He ran multiple marathons, even after his diagnosis, he was still running. Yeah. So, it's a bit more challenging, I think, when you're younger because you could chalk it up to other things. IBS. He was bowel cancer, so IBS, stress, and we had loads of stress, unfortunately.
Jonathan, my alive husband, his first wife died from bowel cancer, and she was 37. So yes, you're so right. And actually, even though there was a known history in her family, the doctor still didn't pick it up because she was young and healthy. But anyway, I am jumping ahead, and I want to let you tell your story in your own words and stop being so greedy for information. So if you wouldn't mind telling both me and the listeners what brought you into our very unique club.
Well, ultimately cancer, and I think my situation is a bit different because maybe I think it's different and it may not be different. I've taken it with a bit of understanding. As soon as we got the diagnosis, it was, stage 4 palliative care. So I started the grieving process, I think, at that moment because I have a medical background. I was in the United States Air Force for 8 years as a pharmacy technician, but when you get deployed, you have to know more medical stuff because you'd be the medic. So I knew what palliative meant, and kind of we approached it knowing the outcome, even though we were both stubborn.
That's a heavy diagnosis to get, isn't it? To go straight to and a young, healthy bloke. I mean, goodness me, that's sorry. Just every time I hear the moment when people hear that it's terminal or they get that horrible knock at the door, it makes all the hairs stand up. But it doesn't matter how many times you hear about it; it's still utterly horrible. So, sorry. Please continue.
Yeah, but I mean, we dove into the cancer journey and the saying, throwing everything but the kitchen sink, or
yeah.
And I think being young and going through it, I think that gives you a little bit more, it gives you a different perspective. Like, well, we could exercise, diet, exercise.
Mm-hmm.
We did cold therapy. Like, he got into Wim Hof and breathing, and we went to London Nutrition Clinic, so he got help with his diet. He got 158. We did non-standard medication. We did absolutely everything that we could possibly do. And I think that is like, when you're young, you're like, nah, we're invincible.
I definitely hear this, and in sort of the older generation, almost quite accepting of the medical guidance. And whilst I, in no way can I say that alternative can work, people do believe they do. Now, you said they're non-standard medication. Are we talking cannabis?
Well, CBD, high percentage CBD oil, and then, off-label medications, so doxycycline, all sorts of stuff. If you go to certain doctors, they'll tell you, well, it's gonna starve the cancer in a way. It's gonna make the cancer weaker, and we thought, well, what do we have to lose?
Yeah, I think I would be of the same mindset. I'm very fortunate that I'm cancer. So you don't know, we had on the a campaign, I was going to say that again, it's life-ending treatment. So, and I asked her on mic, would you do it? And even doing that job, she said, well, I don't know for sure. I think so, but you don't know until it comes, do you? But I definitely suspect that in that situation, you would, throw everything but the kitchen sink out.
Yeah, so I mean, it's really weird because I would say that even his first round of chemo, he was healthier than I've ever seen him because, he had this, like, to get the diagnosis, he got very ill. He went to his GP repeatedly, started dropping weight, a lot of gut issues, and I would say once it was after Christmas, it was 27th of December, he couldn't get out of bed. And so we were just like, we're calling 111. We're going to take him to A&E and see what's wrong. I'd been scheduled for an endoscopy, colonoscopy, just to check him out. And we were like, he's not going to make it if he waits another week for it. So took him to A&E. They did some scans. They found the tumor. They pushed him into surgery right away, and then they found that it had spread to his liver. So, when he got released from there, it was like, well, they got the primary tumor out. We're going to tackle with chemotherapy the rest of it. And the first round of chemo, it was 6 months, 8 rounds, 6 months. And I would say a couple months after he had started, he had weight put on, he was running again, he was super healthy, and it was like we were living normal life. And then, when that round of chemo ends, they put him on oral, and then that's when stuff started to change, and it wasn't working as well, and then we had to do another therapy, and that's the cancer progressing,
isn't it? And I'm hearing there that you got this kind of glimmer of hope that he looked like he was back to normal. And particularly with cancer deaths, that you get throughout the process, you get these periods of brightness and lightness where you think, oh, okay, maybe they're back, and then so soon afterwards you just go back into this horrible despair. And we all know, actually probably we don't all know what the drugs do to these people. And you say as much or as little as you like, because I know it's very personal, but they do turn people into very different beings. They're not the person that you married, are they?
I think we got lucky, actually. So I think the only bad experience that we got with chemotherapy was he had tingling sensation in his hands and feet. He, of course, he would be a bit tired that day once he came home. And for the most part, I regard him as a superhero because he took it on the chin like a champ. And, it's like he has rolled with it, and, he barely complained about it. I think it was maybe the first couple chemotherapies, his first couple sessions, he had to wear gloves because he had cold sensitivity. But after that, it was like he was grabbing stuff out the fridge. I was like, what the heck? What are you on about? You can't be touching cold stuff. And then he started doing the cold submersion therapy and all this stuff. And it was not even a bother. It would be just the day that he would come back, he'd be a bit tired. And, we still were going to the beach. He has 4 children from a previous marriage, and we would get the boys over. It was, party as usual.
How old are his boys?
So there's 14, 12, and 10. His daughter, which we did not have a relationship with towards the end, she's 15, and that was part of the stress. So when I say he had massive amounts of stress that masked the diagnosis almost. It was because his ex had stopped him from seeing all his children. But in that time that we weren't seeing his children, she had coached the daughter into not, into not obtaining or sustaining the relationship with her father. So yeah, that I would say March 2020 was the last time we saw her, and she didn't see him again ever.
Oh my goodness, that's so sad. Even in all this.
Yeah, even though with the diagnosis and everything, but we had to take their mom to court to get access back, and that was around the time when his gut started acting up, was when we were in court. And it was, I think, in October of 2020 is when we were pretty much told in a court case that, he had no right to his daughter because she was old enough. At the time, she was 12, almost 13. She was old enough to make her own choice. And since she had been coaxed by her mom, or, to think a certain way, she dug in.
Children are very susceptible, aren't they? And this weaponizing of children, I have seen it happen in, friends and acquaintances of mine. And it just feels like such a cruel thing to do, because who's winning here? Like, who's winning if your kids don't see their biological parent? I'm taking out the biological parents that are arseholes here, of course, but most of us just want what's best for them, don't we?
Yeah, and that's the weird thing, because we tried, even Andy when he was alive, and we knew what was coming. We were like, you should make an effort to make sure that she sees him, because she might say she may not want to see him now, but years down the road, she's going to have probably regret, and there's no turning back the hands of time.
I've just written down the word therapy, because this kid's going to need some, isn't she, in the future? I think that's going to be a very difficult thing to live with. She has to stand by the decision that she made, and presumably she was given the autonomy here. But yeah, that must have been incredibly difficult for him. And as you say, an enormous stress when you're literally fighting for your life.
Yeah. And the court case was happening before his actual diagnosis, before he went into hospital. And I'm to this day, I might hold this grudge forever, where, if she were just a good parent, or she just behaved like a normal adult, we would have caught it sooner. But, you can't.
No, there's a lot of what ifs and shoulda, woulda, couldas, isn't there? The anger is very normal, and you are just over a year through your journey, and I will tell you, the anger does dissipate. So talk to me a little bit about the end. When things really kind of got bad at the end, and how did you cope with that? What support did you have?
We have been very lucky. Like, Andy he's one of 5 children, and he has 3 siblings that live right around, here in.
Oh, that's nice.
His brother lives in Thailand, but he came when he started chemotherapy. He came and stayed for, I think it was like 8 months. He stayed.
Oh, wow.
So we got lucky with his parents being so close by, his siblings coming and always checking up on him. And we had that support up until the end. Now, towards the end, we had planned to get married. So Andy died March 15th of last year, and we got engaged after his diagnosis. He had wanted to propose before lockdown, but because we got stuck at this side of the Atlantic, all the stuff to propose to me was on the other side of the he got the gemstone for my ring and everything sent over, and it came after he got out of the hospital, and then he proposed, which then we decided we would get married March 24th, 2022. So towards the end, we were in wedding planning mode, and we were still working. He didn't give up work until probably his last hospital visit. And we had planned a pre-honeymoon so that I could see some of my friends. And so we went a month before he passed. We were in Las Vegas. We went skydiving, and we, looking back now, I mean, I saw him every day, so you don't realize the changes that person goes through. If you see them every day, it's like, that's your normal.
Yeah.
But looking back at the pictures, and if I were to compare the pictures from February 20 to like 6 months before, he dropped so much weight. His abdomen was swelling. He was starting to get swollen feet. And those are signs. I'm sure if you talk to other people that had someone pass from cancer, I think the word's cachexia or something like that. That's like the signs of the body getting ready to pass. And he had that while I would say starting November, he started to drop weight, but in February while we were away, his abdomen was swelling, his feet were starting to swell, and he was starting to get tired. And then when we got back, he was getting much weaker, and, he was very stubborn. So he was still like, no, I'm not going to go into the hospital. I feel fine. I was like, the swelling means that you should get it checked out. That's probably acid building. Your body is, I knew, I was like, your body's shutting down. And
Even
then
that's a horrible thing to have to articulate to somebody you love, isn't it? If they're kind of still in a little bit of denial about it, that's really difficult.
it was difficult because we made so much effort. I like the holistic care and all that other stuff. And, every time he would meet with a nutritionist or his holistic doctor, or, there's a clinic in Scotland, I think it's 158 Clinic, that specializes in these off-label medicines. And every time he talked to them, he was like, I'm just trying to get years. Like, I don't want to tell me, no, we'll get you through a few months or whatever. He was like, I want to see my youngest child turn 18. So that was he had that goal. And I think he just focused on getting more time. And so me telling him, like, your body's shutting down, he wasn't hearing it. And it took him, he was doing a oxygen therapy, so hyperbaric oxygen treatment. So we took him to his appointment, me and his mother. And while he was in there, I called his doctor. I was like, look, he's showing signs of the abdomen swelling. He's tired. I know what this is. He needs to be seen. What do I need to do? And then, we live in Bournemouth, and Poole Hospital has the cancer urgent treatment facility. And so they're like, just bring him in when he's ready. They'll have a bed ready for him. And, I had to go into the hyperbaric oxygen treatment center, and I pretty much had to pick him up. Like, that was the first time I had to physically pick him up to move him. And he had lost so much weight. He's 6 foot tall. I'm 5'4". So, for someone my size to pick up someone so tall, that shows you how light he was. I think we were closer in weight at that point. And, from there, I told him, like, you're not moving properly. You don't have the strength to do stuff. We're going to take you to the hospital. And then that was the start of the end, essentially, because, that's when the doctors were telling him, it's you got to get ready. You got to think of where you want to be when you pass. And, he was still in the mindset that we were going to have our wedding on the 24th, because we had the venue, we had people flying from the US, everything planned out. It was like a 5-day event that he was a bridezilla.
He was a bridezilla. I love that.
And he did all the planning. He was like, no, we're going to have this, we're going to have that. And, he wanted a big shindig. Like, this, looking back, it was his last blowout. Like, well, if you want to get married, you need to think about it now. Like, for you here today if you want it, or you could go home and do it at home with your family. And so, we made the choice that we would do it at home with family, and it'll give us a couple days. We had the hospital bed put in the house, so everything was kitted out for him to go comfortably. And then the 15th, he passed.
I'm so sorry. It doesn't matter how many of these I hear. It's still heartbreaking that 3 days after your wedding day, your husband died. And there's nothing that can repay that. And for it to happen to you when you're so young, you've got so much life to live ahead of you, and the cruelty of it just will never cease to hit hard with me.
It's cruel, but then I try to look at things I'm a very glass half full person. And I was like, well, he got what he wanted. He got married. Like when I say he was a bridezilla, he spent triple what he was allowed to on a tuxedo. He got like what was it? The 007 movie premiere. He saw Daniel Craig with this red velvet tux top, like a suit top, and he had to go get one made. And he never got to wear it, except we buried him in it. When the funeral came, we used a lot of the catering and stuff for the funeral. I think it's, to me, he got what he wanted in the end. The night he got married, because we were so conscious of food, and he had his nutritionist tell him his marching orders. He had mentioned that if he gets Five Guys, that was him saying he's ready. And so the night of our wedding, we ordered Five Guys, and he, after that that was pretty much the last time he was fully with us. From then on, I was sleeping, not really vocal anymore, and having to lift him and take him to toilet and all that stuff. So
you become a carer, don't you? That's the other thing. You go from, you're a newlywed, but you're a carer. That kind of juxtaposition of those two roles.
But to me, it's an honor to care for him. It was an honor. So
I hear that actually, as you talk about it, I can hear that you did it with, as you describe yourself as glass half full, this kind of very positive mindset that you clearly both, and you could hear that it was what you both wanted, and that you wanted to do that for him.
Yeah, and it was on his terms. So, and I feel like as horrible it is to have gone through it, and I think, I'm pretty sure other people who have seen their loved ones go through cancer, it does, there are points where you're just like, they can't do this much longer. He was such a strong and stubborn person. And I keep saying stubborn because he was very much set in his ways, and he very much wanted to do, like, he did life on his terms. Since, like, talking to his mom since the day he came out. So
I've had two husbands like this.
So I think when the night before he passed, we had a palliative care nurse bathe him. That was the first time he had to be washed by someone. And I think then I was just like, this is what he did not want. Yeah. And, he wasn't vocal at that point, but he was very much in distress having someone wash him, and he was very upset, and he wanted me there, as if, like, if he could speak, it would probably be like, tell this woman to fuck off. But no, she was there teaching me how to do it if I had to do it again. But I think that was it. I was just like, he hated that moment so much. I think that was him, like, yeah, it's time for me to go.
That was his time up, yeah. So did he die with you at home then?
Yeah, so since the wedding, I didn't part ways with him, because the night of the wedding, he had his Five Guys, and then
that was your side, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then, he was at the point where he had been sweating, but we had the GP come out and, give him, it's an allergy medication, but it also kind of does something with your sweat glands, Promotidine, I think it was. And, that's also a sign, like, he's getting ready. So I knew that it could be at any moment. So I didn't leave his side. He was we have 2 reception rooms. So he was in the reception room that we put the hospital bed in. And, I slept on the floor next to him, made sure he was a big Britpop fan. So I put on all his favorite music, and I just slept on the floor next to him. And so I had an alarm going off to check up on him every so often. So the night that he passed, after the nurse left, we got him ready for bed. Everyone said goodnight, like his family was staying. So his mom, dad, one of his sisters, and his brother were staying in the house. And, they went upstairs to bed. I slept next to him on the floor. And from when he and I went to sleep to, my alarm was every hour. So an hour later, I woke up and I just knew that he was getting ready because he had dehydrated completely, and the breathing changes towards the end. So I knew that it was more labored, it was more of an effort, but it was almost mechanical, where it's like the body's just functioning. It's not him consciously doing anything. It's just it going through the motions. And I think by then it wasn't him there. So
Yeah.
I called the family down, called the palliative care team to make sure that they were present. And yeah, about 4 hours later, he went, surrounded by all of us.
This is what I'm hearing. I've just I make notes when people. I've just written the word so much love. That's what I'm hearing, is that he died surrounded by love. Obviously, nobody wants to die at 41. Nobody does. But to die surrounded by the people that you love has to be the best possible death in those circumstances. Goodness me, Sasha, you must have been exhausted, setting an alarm every hour. How did you keep going? Did you have people feeding you and sort of making sure you had water and stuff like that, the basics?
His family had pretty much moved in once he got out of the hospital. Yeah, so he had a care team. We were, it was a concerted effort to make sure that he was good. And we had friends, like, I think the night before we got married, he had some friends come around, and then his children, his sons came over, and pretty much that was their goodbye. I wanted them to come the day after the wedding, but I had to tell their mom, like, it's not how they should see him. And it is like, it's a hard place to make that decision, because I'm making it for them essentially. But also I have to think of, he probably didn't want his children to see him like that. And I think it's better for them to remember him when he could hug them back, and, and he could tell them that he loved them, rather than, I think if he were mentally present and was able to be vocal, he probably would have been like, no, don't see me like this.
And I think that's the kind of almost like the final gift that they can give to their children, is to not let them see them like that if they don't think that they are mature enough for it, I guess, is probably the word. Because I know, you must have intrusive images in your head. Anybody that's lost somebody or gone through any sort of trauma does. And I don't think I'd necessarily want to pop those images into children's heads. But
no.
Some people I speak to, they have seen them, and some people have gone and seen the bodies, and it's very, very personal. You may be aware, I didn't have a full funeral for Ben because his body's never been found. So I had a memorial. It wasn't a celebration of life. I was very adamant, this is not a celebration of life. I wanted everybody in black. And I had all three of my children, including my daughter, who I held in my arms. And for me, it was very important because they hadn't got another way of saying goodbye. But
yeah,
there also wasn't a coffin. And I don't know whether that makes it different, because many people choose not to have small children. It's everything about grief is personal, isn't it? And everything is about your family, your dynamic, and your relationship.
Yeah, and in a way, making that decision for them, I didn't know what the future was holding. So when you talk about funerals, he was cremated, and we did have a service for him. As I mentioned, their mom is a bit difficult.
You're very diplomatic.
The children weren't allowed at the service.
They weren't allowed.
No.
See, that's a different one, isn't it? Because they were certainly old enough to make a choice at the age they were at, weren't they?
Yeah, they wanted to come. They came after he had passed. They had came, and we discussed the service with them, because, that was supposed, the funeral service was also the weekend. We held it the weekend that would have been our wedding. And so they knew that they were scheduled to be down for the wedding. And we told them, well, that we're going to do the funeral instead. And if you want to come, like, here's how we're doing it. Your dad's going to be cremated. We're going to have, people. He was a big Britpop fan, as I mentioned before. He loved all, big Star Wars fan, Marvel, had his likes, and we wanted it to be a reflection of him. And so we were telling the boys, like, yeah, when his coffin's gonna be outside and people could put stickers on it, stuff that he liked, and then, you know, his pallbearers will take him in and he will be wearing the very expensive yeah, he will be in his jacket. So that's what he was going to be cremated in. And, you know, gave them the rundown, and I told them, here are the people that are going to be speaking, your Uncle Paul. So for the wedding, it wasn't just him that was going to be in a red velvet suit. It was his brother Paul, which they're like 18 months apart, and so they grew up very close. And my nephew, who was going to be one of the best men.
Can I interrupt you? Sorry, I know I'm naughty for this, but you say he has a brother that's very close in age. Do they look alike?
They do, and they don't. You could tell they're brothers.
Yeah,
they're not identical, obviously.
I only asked because Ben was also from a big family. He was one of 6, and 5 of them are boys. And the next brother down from him looks very similar to him. And the first time he came to the house after Ben had died, I couldn't look at him. Okay, I looked at him and I just sort of, like, I suppose had what I now know is probably a mini panic attack, because the mannerisms, the walk, everything was so. And I'm just thinking, for you to see him wearing the red velvet jacket, was it quite unsettling, or I might just be I might be projecting my feelings.
So although they look similar face wise, I think Andy was a bit taller, just a bit taller, and a bit built differently physically.
Just enough for it not to be too triggering.
Yeah. I will say that when afterwards, seeing his boys, like, although they didn't go to the funeral, we still got to see them. We see them once a month through an agreement that we have with their mom.
Yeah.
And when, you know, now I'm starting to see like little mannerisms that are very much Andy in them. And
lovely though, isn't it? I love that.
It is not triggering, but it's almost comforting. It's like, well, that still lives on.
Yeah. I find this, and, you know, I accompany, I don't like to call her my stepdaughter because she is my daughter, but John's biological daughter, the other day. And I said, you know, if you want to think about your mum, like, she's here. And also, my darling, go look in the mirror because you have that face. And I think for them, you know, my boys look very like their dad as well. And I think it is a comfort for them as well to know that they've got this kind of genetic connection to somebody that they can't see anymore.
Yeah, and it's good because since I got very close with all of Andy's friends and his family, when he was married previously, he wasn't allowed to have relationships with all. So a lot of friends that he lost touch with, I actually invited them to the funeral. And so one of his friends that he grew up with, and I think it was just because she was female, she wasn't allowed to be his friend anymore. But they reconnected after he had separated, but never in person. It was like texting and email. So she came down, and I did a 100K walk in honor of Andy, and that was when she got to meet one of his boys. He came to the walk, and she was just like, "Oh my God, you twitch!
Yeah,
like you're twitching just like your dad. It's you're moving like him. It's so weird.
It's so funny, isn't it? And you think, oh, how can you do that? Like, it's particularly for my youngest, because she was 6 months when I died. I'm like, how can you have possibly inherited his mannerisms? But they do. Yeah. So I actually did a marathon. I like to slip this in wherever I possibly can, because I've only ever done one. I will only ever do one. And I did it very slowly. I do like to, but I found some comfort in doing a physical challenge, because I felt it gave me the impetus to get my backside off the sofa and get outside and do some exercise. I'm not a natural athlete, so that I can't. But I did find that just that, what I considered almost enforced exercise, because if I didn't do it, I was going to probably die on the marathon.
I mean, I've done the 100K walk, and now I'm training in October. I'm going to do a half marathon where I'm actually going to run it. I will say it, for me, because Andy was such an athlete and he ran and he did these things, I hate running. Like, I was in the military and I hate it then. I still hate it now.
But it is one way of getting you out of your own head, isn't it?
Out of my own head. And it almost connects me to him in a way, because it's like, it's around, he would be doing a run or something. And I feel like, well, he had such pleasure from running. I tried to think, well, although I hate it, it's something that I could continue. And like I when I did my 100K walk, I signed up one of his sons to do a 10K so that, you know, when I finish, he could do it with his cousin and all that stuff. And it's something that he could continue on that was very much Andy. And now he has it in his head that he's gonna, because Andy did, and he's got it in his head that he's gonna do the same marathons, but he's gonna do it 1 second faster.
I mean, if he wants to compete with my time, that shouldn't be a problem. So, Sasha, I can tell from looking at you that you take your physical health and presumably your mental health quite seriously, because you describe yourself as being a glass half full kind of person. But I don't think anybody can get through something like this unscathed. What have you used to help yourself navigate through?
As I mentioned before, I have great support. So I have his whole family. They have not abandoned me. And in fact, they're more, I see them more now than I ever have. And it, you know, they made sure that Andy told all of them that he wanted me happy afterwards. And so they took that as gospel truth. And they're like, no, we're going to make sure she's eating. We're going to make sure she has company. And they did that. And in a way, I guess it helps them as well, because he and I were thick as thieves. And I know his mom tells me that I know so much about his life, even though I wasn't there. Like our relationship only spanned 5 years, but I could tell you his life story because all we would do was talk. And then, you know, it's weird because he was not just a partner to me. So I worked for him in the company. So he was a mentor as well. And, you know, I wouldn't say I idolized him, but I kind of did. And it was like everything that he did was just super awesome. And so it's I get to continue having all that memory that he imparted with me, and I could continue to impart it with other people. So it, you know, I guess it's comforting for them, but then also afterwards I had Macmillan, they offer grief counseling. So I did that for the full, like, I think they give you 24 sessions or something like that. And I took part, I used it all. Yeah. I would say, unfortunately, what tends to happen, and I don't know if it gets discussed very often, but as soon as someone dies, you're in work mode. You're planning the funeral, you're settling their affairs, you're having to, you know, you pretty much have to take the burden of, you know, making sure that their estate, or, you know, the fact that they're not here anymore, is handled and handled properly. And, you know, he had a company and I tried to run it for 3 months after. Like, so right away I was trying to see if we could salvage his company that he created, which after 3 months we decided it's not viable. So now it's in liquidation, and you know, you have all this administrative work. It keeps you busy. And then on top of that, I was trying to stay in the country. Yeah. So I had to apply for a visa, and then that didn't go well because I was here on a work visa working through the company. When we decided the company was going to close, I decided I was going to try for a bereaved spouse. I wasn't here on a spousal visa, so it didn't go through.
So how did you get it sorted? Did you get it?
It's in the hands of the Home Office under a family visa. I don't know yet.
I hope. Do you want to stay? Presumably, you don't want to go back to Florida.
I want to stay. So we discussed me going forward. So although we had denial, we had some foundation of realization of what the situation was.
Some of those conversations, I'm doing my inverted commas here, the conversations, yeah.
And, you know, I'm not able to have children. And so his children are the closest thing that I'll get to children. And I, you know, as soon as I got on the scene, I was all in. You know, when we decided to be a couple, it was, you know, he has children and that comes first. Children come first. And we weren't going to have children. So we invested in them. And so going forward and knowing, sadly, what type of mother they have, me staying here would be more beneficial for them, more beneficial for me, because they're his future. Like that's how he lives on. And to me, I couldn't be at peace knowing that I was so far away from them. You know, I don't want to leave all his stuff in a house where I know that their mom probably want to take care of it. So I can't impart all the stuff that he wanted for them to inherit later on down the line, like his record collection, his guitars, all this stuff. So leaving the country with that stuff, that would have been too much for me, I think. It would be like taking their father away in a different sense. So we decided that I would get a house here, and, you know, it would be suitable for me and the children. Knowing that I can't have children, you know, in a way, because the house is through life insurance, and as weird as it is to get that come in and then spend it.
Conflicting emotions there, isn't there? I know.
It's like it's good to have a house, and it's good to have, you know, security, but at the same time, it's like you paid a high price for it. And
oh, bloody hell. And anybody that thinks that we're, you know, rolling around in piles of cash, you know, they're very mistaken.
Yeah, it's like it's almost like you feel like you're in the cartel and you got handed dirty.
Yeah. I get, actually, I've never heard it described like that, but yeah, I do get that.
So for me, it's like, well, whatever I have to invest smartly, because it should be left to them. If it's something that I benefited through their father, and I know I'm not going to have children, I could remarry, but, you know, there's prenups. Yeah, I'll leave it to them, because that's what he would have wanted. And if he were still on this earth, we would have bought a house together and would have left it to them. So, you know, it's to me, I rather do the right thing, and the right thing is to make sure that they're okay, and, you know, plan and intend to do.
Sasha, you are such a lovely person. I can feel how good you are just talking to you. Your moral compass is strong and it is on point, and it's really lovely to hear that from you. Do you think that you're, like, going forward with your life, do you think that you're afraid?
Oh, of course. I mean, right now, because I'm going through the visa process, I'm not allowed to work. So, you know, yeah, I have this security from the life insurance, but I'm not able to work. And to me, that's like, well, I'm not providing for myself. And then when I do go to work, I'm going to have this big, long gap. And that's scary for me, because I've always managed, like, I was in the military, I had that career. When I got out, I was a student for a while. And then I started working for Andy and his company. And, you know, it's almost like a bit of your identity's gone, on top of the fact that you lost this person. So, you know, I've taken it upon myself to make sure that there's not any gaps. I'm like, I volunteer for SAFA because that's a military organization. Military is near and dear to my heart. I do buddy care. I go and see cancer patients that are a bit isolated. And I'm also a member of WAY, which is Widowed and Young, and I'm volunteer.
I'm not a member anymore, but it is where John and I met. It's where Lulu and I met. Okay. It's where great swathes of me and my team WID, as we call ourselves, that's where we met. And I absolutely will let you know if we're doing any meetups. I'd love to bring you into my tribe. I think you'd fit in beautifully. Hearing you talk about taking on his business, I did exactly the same thing. Had his own business, so when he died, I tried valiantly to run it. I don't speak French, and it was based in France.
Oh.
I have no knowledge of wood floors, apart from I know what looks nice, and it was a wood flooring company.
Yeah.
So I managed. It kept me and the kids afloat for a while, and then I gave it to his little brother, who I hope will make a success of it and provide for his family. He's the closest, I think, to Ben, and I would love to see him take something that Ben created. But I have to say, French-speaking wood businesses were not for me. Oh, Sasha, it's been absolutely amazing to hear from you. I wish you so much luck in your visa, if anybody knows anybody at the Home Office. And I wish you so much joy and happiness. And it's so lovely to hear that you've been swept up by Andy's family and loved by them, because I'm very close to Ben's family as well. And I do think it makes such a difference.
And to get that right away, like,
not common at all.
it's quite sad that, a death can also break a family.
Oh, absolutely.
And I've been very fortunate, because it could have gone the other way and I would have been in this country without any support. So I think for going through such a hard loss, I know that people grieve differently, but it's so much easier to comfort than to butt heads.
Yeah, of course it is. It doesn't, that applies to most of life. And it just seems like some people are intent on making life difficult for others. And I can't understand that mentality myself. And we've all come across it in various walks of life. But the idea that somebody would be unkind or cruel to somebody who was widowed, it just doesn't sit right at all. And I can't comprehend it. But people are people, hey? Well, thank you so much for coming on to talk to me. You have been like a breath of fresh air, and it's been really lovely to, I feel, I don't know, like you've just talked me through this horrendous story, but I've left thinking, my God, this is a powerhouse of a woman. I want to be her friend.
I think it's the blind hope of, like, American blind hope thing.
Well, blind hope, positivity. It's a thin line, isn't it? Blind hope and positivity. Or blind hope and positivity in your life, and I hope to stay in touch with you. So I'll say goodbye on my Sasha, but I'm going to keep you on and tie up with you after. So thank you once again, and good luck with everything. Thank you for listening today. We'll be back with you soon for more from the front line of loss.
But for now, as you were.